welcome to another edition of the NAIC Insight Series. I'm your host, Bob Green, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Margaret Anadu of Goldman Sachs. Welcome, Margaret.
Bob, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, I've been looking forward to our conversation. First of all, you have perhaps the best background that we've ever had on here. Normally, it's either an NAIC background or it's an office. I love your artwork. Are those for sale?
You know, they are for sale. They're expensive, though. When we when we put the office in our home right outside our kids' rooms, I don't think we planned for me to be working out of this office for, gosh, close to 2 years now. But yes, so
that's outstanding.
Buy a few.
I would be way out of my league buying those from a Goldman Sachs professional. So I'm probably not going to bid on them, knowing that they've got great sentimental value. But well, look, let's start. I've been excited about this conversation, one, because of our friendship, and two, because you just represent so many things today in the industry. You are a partner with Goldman Sachs. You've got great experience in a variety of areas. You're running a business. You're a woman of color, and you're a mom, and many other things. So we're excited to explore today.
Thank you. Yes, I have a lot going.
So you're running you're head of the Goldman Sachs sustainability business, and you also sit on the firm's, you co-chair the Asset Management Sustainability Council. Tell us a little bit about your roles and how you've come to be in those roles.
Sure thing. So I would say there are three key things that I'm focused on at the firm, and luckily they're all tied together with this core emphasis around impact. So I'm our global head of sustainability and impact across our asset management business. So at Goldman, and this is from the firm-wide level, but also in asset management, we think about sustainability in two key pillars. So our focus on inclusive growth, and equally important, our work around climate transition. So across asset management, and that's our public side business, stocks and bonds, our alternatives work, real estate, private credit, corporate equity. I'm focused on our strategy of delivering that sustainability and impact work, not just in specific impact-focused vehicles, but really how we think about it across everything that we do. A second thing that I'm focused on, I chair our urban investment group business, which I know that you know well. This is a 20-year-old impact-focused business at the firm, really focused on using capital to narrow opportunity gaps for low-income communities, low-income families, really just driving capital to places where, unfortunately, it doesn't naturally and organically flow. And then third, pretty exciting, over the last year, I've also been co-leading up our effort around 1 million Black women, which is a $10 billion initiative we launched to narrow the racial wealth gap, specifically with a focus on Black women. So
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, so I was just going to say those are the three things I'm focused on. And in terms of how I've gotten here, a lot of it was the work in the urban investment groups. I've been at Goldman for close to 20 years now. After a pretty quick stint in our global markets business, I transitioned over to the urban investment group. So impact investing really has been what I've been doing my entire career.
That's outstanding. And I look forward to going into a lot of those areas. But one of the things that we found with this format is people are very curious about where people came from. I'd love to hear a bit of your story. Where did you grow up, and what values were stressed in your home?
Oh, sure. So I had a great childhood. So my father is Nigerian, my mother's American. So I actually grew up pretty evenly split between Lagos, Nigeria, and then Houston, Texas. And I would say professionally, my upbringing in Houston, Texas was pretty formative. So I grew up, like many folks, in a pretty low income community in Houston. I didn't understand every aspect of it at the time, but I did know that our neighborhood didn't have nice houses like other communities. We didn't have, grocery stores every 3 blocks. We didn't there was just a lot that I knew that we didn't have. And so when I was younger, I understood that as, man, we drive across town for everything, or there are just things we didn't have. Like, why was I, bused 40 minutes to go to a quality school? So I grew up understanding that my neighborhood wasn't like others, that it didn't provide the opportunities that I knew that others had. But also importantly, just in terms of values in my home, I also understood that I was not going to be limited by what was around me. I was that kid that was in every summer program, every after school program. Like my mother, I don't know how she did it, but she did. And so by a lot of hustle, a lot of work, she got me to Harvard. She figured it out. So God bless my mom. So that was very formative for me. And so I'll skip past a few years, but I ended up on Wall Street, not to have a career in finance. This is not where I thought I'd be today, but actually just to save up money for law school. I had this feeling that, the law were the rules, and I wanted to get in there, change the rules, tweak the rules, and I couldn't afford law school, didn't have the money to go. And so I was like, where can I go and save up some money pretty quickly, get on my law career? And I ended up as an analyst at Goldman Sachs, and I was hooked. I knew very quickly that my colleagues, the people surrounding me, and this is even in global markets, had the ability to have an impact on where capital went. And I understood that in my community, the one that I grew up in, Houston, it mattered what businesses people were willing to invest in, where housing got developed, where quality hospitals were. And so pretty quickly in my time at Goldman, I realized if I could figure this out, and if I could have an impact on where capital would be invested and use that quite frankly, that power to make a difference in communities like the one that I grew up in, what could possibly be better? And so I was still an analyst at Goldman when I transitioned over to the Urban Investment Group, and it was like pinch me every day after that. Like, am I really getting paid and learning, and in this environment where every transaction we close makes a difference for a person, a family, a business, a community? And so, here we are almost 20 years later, and it's been absolutely fantastic.
That's outstanding. I love your story. And we have a lot of young folks, high school age people, college age people that really don't get to see examples of people like you and your colleagues. I'll just sort of probe one particular area. Take us from, you have graduated high school and you're at Harvard now. That first year, talk to us about your freshman year and how you dealt with the transition. I mean, both the geographic transition, what must have been a cultural transition, but also an academic transition. How did you deal with that much change so fast, Margaret?
Oh gosh, it's funny. No one. I don't think anyone's ever asked me about my first year of college. Quite the transition. That would be an understatement. So, I was not. I mentioned we came from. There wasn't a lot of extra money around. Mm-hmm. So unlike a lot of my peers at Harvard who, junior year and senior year of high school, they went on these college trips, they visited a bunch of places. The first time I saw Harvard was when I got there, right. To be as a student. That was my first time in Boston. That was my first time on the East Coast, actually. So the first thing was just being cold. Even that was a transition. Actually, and I will give a quick shout out to Harvard here. They not only, I was obviously a scholarship kid, every scholarship in the world, et cetera, but they also focused on low income kids who came from places that, from warmer climates. So not only did they give my books, my tuition, they actually got me a jacket. So thank you for that. I was not cold. So, from that, it was just the exposure to, extreme privilege that I just hadn't witnessed before, when everyone else was, planning vacations and big trips and going off to Sweden or to ski or this and that over, Thanksgiving break. I was, getting on a bus to stay with, my friends who were from New York and, just hanging out with their family. So there was a lot that was different. But at the same time, and I think going back to this piece around values and where I came from, I never felt lesser. I never felt less qualified. I knew I deserved to be there. I knew that I could work hard. And so it was wildly different, but it was okay. And it was good. And I was, a happy striver. And I think you fall into, the groups of friends that make sense for you. And so I was friends with a lot of women from New York. I wonder what that's about. But, a lot of us didn't have a lot of money. A lot of us were scholarship kids, and we bound together, and it was great. And going back even further, that was a pretty big transition, certainly, but I'd also already had the transition of moving from Nigeria to the US. So, I'm all about a new situation, and I'm used to being the only one in the room in many ways, whether that's gender, whether that's race, whether that's ethnic background. And so college, that first year, it was certainly tough, but I was exhilarated by it. It was this incredible challenge to fit in and to succeed. And, I think I was energized by it.
So I love the identification of the happy striver, right? I mean, if you think about that, that's something that literally, if you can carry that as a life model, right? Happy and striving, right? That's just something that works every place you go. So let's talk now. Let's get you to Goldman Sachs. So you graduate from Harvard. Clearly, you did well. You were a computer science major. Frankly, that was pretty novel at the time for you to major in computer science. That term means different things based upon which decade you did it. But clearly, that was a new area, and it's a tech area for a woman of color. You arrive at Goldman, and you're working in the derivatives business, a very complex, somewhat esoteric, certainly hard to understand business. Talk to us about that. And again, I'm noticing a trend in your career. You take these things almost in the vanguard, and then you build them and develop them, and then you go do the next thing. That seems to be an element of your career. Talk to us about that early assignment and the competitiveness that we've all heard about that is Goldman Sachs.
Sure. So, yes, I did start in derivatives after my, 37,000 interviews to get the job. And it's funny, that was another really interesting and tough transition, because I didn't have an econ background. I didn't have a finance background. And so I'd say that was actually a moment of some pretty significant insecurity. I spent a lot of time, at night on Investopedia, like literally at that point I was like, what is a bond? Like that's where I came into that situation. But I joined such an incredible team. I still think a lot about the first woman I worked for, Midich Kirksall, who was just an incredible mentor, and really became a friend. And it was a relatively small team. We were doing, analysis and client service for hedge funds and mutual funds, mostly flow-driven trading ideas. And it was certainly complex, and very esoteric, but it also gave me some confidence, because at the end of the day, I was doing a lot of, coding and manipulating of data to see trends and, figure out what were, interesting trading ideas that we could share with our clients and help them execute and help them meet their goals. I will say though, that's where it's funny, because I didn't start in a principal investing role, but it was that role that really drove home for me that at the end of the day, principal investing was what I wanted to do. Because being part of a lot of analysis, coming up with these great solutions for clients, I always found myself feeling like, did they trade on it? Did it go well? Did they make money?
Right.
Do I get some of the money? definitely sort of, put that bug in me. The other piece about it, which you mentioned, sort of the esoteric piece of it, and I guess we'll probably talk a little bit about the Urban Investment Group later. Probably drove me to real estate in a way,
Okay.
right? You're talking about, trading indices and flow-driven trading ideas and things like that. It can get, pretty removed pretty quickly. There's important role for those types of investments, and it's an incredibly important part of capital markets broadly. But at the same time, if you compare the work that I was doing in derivatives to a lot of the work that I got to do in the Urban Investment Group, where we're literally providing a sponsor with the capital they need to build a building in a community that needs it, where it's going to make a big difference. And I'm sitting here in Brooklyn. I can walk 3 blocks from my house and see developments that we've built, and neighborhoods that we've changed, and assets that we've renovated. And so it's funny that I went from this role in derivatives to, a short few years later, to the most tangible and literally real types of investing that you can do. So it's funny. It taught me a lot. It was certainly the foundation. It was very fast paced. It was an incredibly dynamic environment. It taught me so much about capital markets more broadly. But at the end of the day, it also, in some ways, paved the path for what I ended up doing and what I wanted to do. So all of these things were coming together. My understanding of the power of capital, my desire for something that felt really tangible, but then that, 13-year-old me, that 14-year-old me going back to my neighborhood in Houston, when I put all the pieces together that I could, be a decision maker about capital and allocate capital and decide where it should flow, and do that in a way that was going to impact neighborhoods that were important to me, and do it at Goldman Sachs, or arguably, one of the most important platforms globally in financial services. Again, it was pinch me, right? Could this be real? Is this real? So you talk about that happy striver. There are no amount of hours that were too much. Like you couldn't pull me out of the building, right? Every moment felt so special, so important, so consequential. Yeah.
Well, look, you've touched on it, and I want to go there now. The Urban Investment Group, right? First of all, great name. That's where I actually came to know Goldman Sachs. The Urban Investment Group was a member of NAIC 20 years ago when the group was first formed. A lot of your colleagues that were there, and I just remember thinking everybody should be doing this, right? All of the big banks should be doing this, but not everybody could. And kudos to Goldman for being cognizant enough at that point to realize that you actually can do good while doing well, right? So you have the Urban Investment Group. It's a multi-strategy play. You guys were investing in a variety of different things. Take us from the sort of genesis of the idea, and then you're so humble, I'm going to brag on you if you don't, but the pace of it sharply increased under your leadership and the amount of capital you all were able to deploy. So clearly you accelerated into the growth curve, and I think that's why it's such a success story. Talk to us a little bit about UIG and the vision and what you were ultimately able to achieve with the platform.
Sure. And before that, Bob, you have to come to our 20th anniversary party, which was supposed to be last year, but COVID, but hopefully we'll get it done this.
I'm there.
Awesome. So, the idea in 2001, and it's interesting to talk about given where we sit today, right? Today, we can have a conversation about impact investing or double bottom line investing or ESG. That language didn't even exist really at the time, or it certainly wasn't mainstream in the way that it is now. So if you go back to 2001, when the business started, it was very, very much the most senior leadership of the firm. Our CEO at the time, John Rogers, who was still one of the most senior members of the firm, who said, we have an opportunity to use our financial capital, of course, but our intellectual capital to make a difference in, it was really two key areas at the time. One, in communities, which was the part of the business that I joined and ultimately led, but also, and I know this is why we were a member of NIC, but also provide capital to diverse entrepreneurs. We were focused on Black and Latinx CEOs at the time in the middle market. And, we thought of it somewhat almost as emerging markets that, both these founders and CEOs, but also importantly, these communities are so devastatingly underserved. Yes. That build a team and a practice and deploy capital in these areas, we can not only make a difference for those, CEOs, founders, and businesses for those communities, but we should do really well financially at the same time. And just to speak to the firm's commitment around it, this was Goldman Sachs balance sheet capital, right? This was, the firm's capital, and I don't think we used third-party funds until, just probably a few years ago. And so in the early years of the business, we were investing, $20-30 million a year, proudly, excitedly, great opportunities. We on the real estate side, we did obviously a lot in New York, was where we started, given where we're headquartered. But even on the corporate side of the business, great investments in some radio businesses we invested in, healthcare businesses, nurse finders. Chuck James, who sadly passed away, was one of the first significant entrepreneurs in the quick service food space. So it was an incredible effort, and for me to kind of join that team at its infancy and get to work with a small but mighty and passionate and curious team who genuinely felt to the core that we were out there changing the world with capital. I can't imagine a better place to have started my investing career. And then over the course of that 20 years, it really, and I'll talk a little bit more about the real estate side, we just got more and more ambitious. The first investments were, it was a single product. We were doing all equity investing, predominantly in housing, right? The view was, every healthy, thriving community, starts with quality, accessible, affordable housing. If you don't have that, it's pretty much downhill. And then beyond that, we just kept building on it and building on it. And so what started out as just, equity in terms of our tools that we were deploying we started doing lending, we started doing tax credit investing. And then from an asset class perspective, we, what was once just a housing effort, all of a sudden we were doing.
You're good.
Sorry, sorry. We were also doing, grocery stores, industrial facilities. We got into the healthcare space with this view that at the end of the day, communities need all of the things, right? You want the place where you're going to buy your quart of milk, the place you're going to send your kids to school, the, movie theater where you're going to, have affordable entertainment for your family. And so as that ambition grew, the size of our investments grew, the types of our investments grew, and then also geographically. Again, what started as an effort in New York City, then, we were in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. We made very sizable investments in Detroit after the bankruptcy. We've done a good amount of work in Utah, Los Angeles. We started making meaningful investments in Chicago. So it's just been a story of growth. And while I appreciate you giving me some of that credit, I think the biggest credit is just that it was working, right? We were real impact. We were delivering strong returns. And so this thesis that you could have an intentional, partner-driven, way to invest capital that was going to not just deliver those financial returns, but those social returns as well. As it was working, we got more capital, and and then it was more capital. So it really was just a story of, quite frankly, that success driving the growth. And I'm obviously humbled to have gotten to play a role in that.
So I'm a huge fan of the Urban Investment Group story, but one of the things that drives my appreciation for what Goldman did with Urban Investment Group actually doesn't appear within the walls of Goldman. When you think of entrepreneurs and developers who are able to get Goldman Sachs' name and any amount of money, certainly a representative amount, but any amount of money from Goldman Sachs on their cap table, the other follow-on equity, the leverage, the conviction that other people have to invest goes up. So there was actually a ripple effect of what you all did with your direct investing, particularly the equity that you put up, but also the other forms of capital in terms of getting other players comfortable and wanting to play. Did you guys have a sense of that? Do you have any examples of where that made a difference?
Absolutely. It's funny because it's not something I think it certainly wasn't the initial goal. And I think we started to see that more and more over time. And I think what you're talking about in terms of specific entrepreneurs, we actually also saw that be the case in entire, quite frankly, communities and cities through the work. And I'll give you kind of one funny example. We've done a lot in Newark, New Jersey. It was one of the kind of first key markets we really targeted after New York. And that we had a strong thesis, right? So a significant part of the New York City broader regional economy, great kind of real estate bones, one of the busiest and largest airports in the country, great corporate anchors, Prudential, Panasonic. Just a great city. But then, of course, we know the other side of the story, which is the poverty levels, the educational attainment. So it just didn't make sense. And when we first started investing there, and we've done over $1 billion at this point, we didn't really compete much for deals, right? We were, sleeves rolled up with the public sector, whether it was, Mayor Booker or Mayor Baraka, really putting deals together, thinking about how they could be financed, thinking about the development program. And there weren't a lot of other financial services providers beside us or competing against us. And I would say over the last, I call it 4 or 5 years, we compete, right. Which it's funny for the team, we say how could fill in the name bank, be trying to compete on this deal. They don't understand this neighborhood like we do, or these partners or these communities, but it's the one place, like when you're really focused on impact and kind of change on a larger scale, you got to take competition as the best sign, right? Now, Citi's investing a lot in Newark, and Chase is doing work there. And that is, again, I have to remind myself and sort of, swallow that competitive spirit. That's a great thing. And so, and exactly what you're saying on the financial side as well, with specific sponsors, when we've provided that, $3 million, equity check, whether it's a real estate developer, a corporate entrepreneur, and then they're all of a sudden getting a, $100 million line from someone 3-4 years later, like that, it is meaningful. And it is nice to know that the work that we're willing to put in to understand a situation, if it's complex or tricky, or there aren't the comps that we'd like to see, that analysis, that extra work bears fruit, not just for that transaction, but to your point, for the trajectory going forward. So it is, again, it wasn't part of the original thesis or plan, but has been an incredible impact that we've witnessed.
That's outstanding. So from that history and that experience and that commitment, in March of last year, you all launched another initiative which falls under your responsibility base, and that's 1 million Black women. So tell us about what the initiative is, and then give us sort of a genesis about how it came to be.
Sure. So this was and is, so as you can imagine, right, it's called 1 million Black women. Pretty exciting and deeply personal for me. So, we've talked about, UIG is 20 years old, right? So we've been investing in Black communities for decades at this point. Yep. And the firm has also, whether it's through our work with 10,000 Women, which was an effort we created over about 15 years ago to support emerging female entrepreneurs in developing countries around the world. Then after the last financial crisis, we did 10,000 small businesses. Again, another significant economic development effort focused on, we let men in this time, both male and female led small businesses in the US. So we have a track record of both in investing literally in these communities, but also creating large initiatives and programmatic elements around what we view as kind of like the key answer, right? So when we did 10,000 women, the view was if you wanted to increase global GDP, then the best investment we could be making is in women entrepreneurs around the world. Similarly, after the crisis, we knew that 50% of private sector employment is by small business entrepreneurs. So we knew that focusing on that space with education, with capital, with services was going to be impactful. So now going back to the events of summer of 2020, it was a moment that I think even for folks like I think yourself and myself who've been in this space, like racial equity has been a part of the work for decades, but to say what we're doing is not enough, it's not sufficient. We got to be bigger, we got to be bolder, we got to do more. And the real challenge, quite frankly, came down from David Solomon. He said, "What are we going to do here?" And he's like, "I don't want any, short-term, small kind of, check to write in the moment." He's like, "What are we going to do that is going to be substantial, that is going to be real, and make a real difference?" And he said, "Come back to me, like not tomorrow, really, really do something." And to myself, Dina Powell-McCormick, Asahi Pompey, but a bunch of us around the firm really put our heads together for probably a full 7 or 8 months saying, what do we want to do? Where do we want to focus? And there were a few key things, similar to how I kind of described how we thought about 10,000 women and 10,000 small businesses. As we thought about how to really narrow racial equity gaps in the US, just given the role that Black women play, right? We're the mothers, the breadwinners, the business owners, civic leaders, the essential workers, the bus drivers, 25% of public sector workers are for Black women. So with that role that we're playing, not just in our own homes, but in the community more broadly, that you're not going to do something substantial and important as it relates to racial equity and gender without a focus on Black women. So that was point one. And we were going to say that loudly, proudly, boldly, and say, here's where we're going to focus. This is a population that we want to support. And that's not just, again, going to be important for those million Black women, but important their family, their communities, and the economy as a whole, which I know you talk about all the time. So that was one. And then two, so that's the who, then it's like the what. Yep. So it's like, what is the role that Goldman Sachs should be playing here, right? We got all sorts of issues, right? That's one of the loudest topics at the time, for good reason, right? Criminal justice, yep. Right? That's not who we are, right? We're a financial services institution that has both the responsibility, but also the opportunity to allocate capital of our own, of our clients, who range from, individuals to, governments, large institutions, mid-sized institutions. So we knew it had to be about capital, about investing, and about our core business, not something that was going to be on the side, but what we do every day. And so all of that really, really came together with this $10 billion investment commitment to not only put capital behind specifically Black female entrepreneurs, which is an important part of the initiative, but also the entire infrastructure that supports Black women, right? So when you want to close that racial wealth gap, which for Black women stands at a completely alarming and unacceptable 90%, our colleagues in global investment research did a very amazing and incredible research piece that formed the foundation of it called Black Womenomics. Mm-hmm. And when you start to really, unpack in a quantitative way that racial wealth gap, you see that every single part of our society that really drives economic prosperity, really drives economic growth. So that's healthcare, educational attainment, access to capital, financial health, workforce and wages. Every part of that, Black women either show the most significant disadvantage or a close second. And so then we had all the debates internally of, should we focus all on one thing? Should we do 10 billion in education or 10 billion access to capital? And what we kept coming back to was this idea that we wanted to be really honest about the complexity of these challenges. I'll use our CEO, David, he talks about how cumulative these issues are. And so we said, you know what, we want to make a difference across all of these areas. We invest across all of these areas. Our firm touches all of these areas. We know that, like healthcare, right? We're not doctors,
Right.
but we know that, even how medical schools get capitalized, where clinics are located, interesting innovations around telehealth and who they reach and who they serve. All of that has capital in the middle of it. And so, so that was the goal we set, that we were going to invest $10 billion alongside $100 million of philanthropy to narrow opportunity for Black women across all of those 7 impact pillars. So again, housing, healthcare, education, financial health, workforce and wages. And so we're about 9 months in, and some of the best work I've ever done.
So what will be the interval or the window where you have enough experience and data to look back to determine if you're being successful?
Oh, great question. In some ways, there's so many metrics of success. So I think that there's some early successes that I would claim even now. So in the early part of the initiative, which I would say we're still in, one of the key pieces that myself and everyone else who works on it was really excited about was this idea of really listening and putting Black women's voices at the center of everything we do, right? If you're going to impact a community, you have to put their voices at the center. And also this idea, which again, quite personal for me as a Black woman, this acknowledgement that we know our challenges, we understand our challenges. Importantly, we understand the solutions, but people don't always listen to us. And so this idea that we were going to say, look, we're making the commitment, we have the resources, we have the investing capabilities, but we want to stop and listen and learn from Black women. And so we've now, through one-on-one conversations, roundtables, broader public listening sessions, we've touched over 20,000 Black women and gotten their ideas, their input. Some of it was validating around the impact pillars, the spaces where we're focused. But already, even from investments I thought we'd be making when we announced in March to where we are now, some of them we wouldn't have thought of, or we wouldn't have known about without that direct listening. So I would say the first piece of success is just the validation of the model, that we can get the right both investment ideas, philanthropic ideas directly from Black women that we engage in when we listen, openly, honestly, and intentionally. In terms of some of the other impacts, I'll go to the other extreme, right? 10 years from now, I want to be able to say 2 things. Speaking just for me, I'm sure my colleagues have different pieces that they're focused on. One that we truly and deeply narrowed opportunity gaps for 1 million Black women, that it was real. And again, given just the number of pillars, that could be, a new affordable home. That could be the scholarship or financing that gets someone that college degree that we know can be a life changer. That could be the new clinic that is built in a healthcare desert in a Black community. So there are a lot of different pieces of it, but we're Goldman, we're data driven, we're all about the numbers. I want to know that that we hit that 1 million, and between you and me, I think we'll hit it before 10 years. And then the second piece, and this one is internal, and it is about Goldman, that we've changed the way we think about this work, right? It's important that this isn't an initiative on the side. There's no 1 million Black women investing team, right? This is the responsibility of our middle market lending team, our real estate team, our growth equity team. Importantly, we actually announced a deal just this morning, Wonder School, which is a Black-led company focused on the early childcare space. So this is everyone's job, right? There's a core team that's keeping everyone focused, that's doing the tracking, that's making sure it gets done. But this is about our investing across the board in everything we do. And so I want, at the end of 10 years to look back and understand that a conversation in an investment committee or, in a deal team room on the side, that's about, how does this impact Black women? Are we reaching, a broad set of communities? If not, what barriers can we discuss and take away? For that to be just commonplace discussion and, just how we invest and how we work will be That'll be success for me.
Outstanding. So look, the marketplace knows we've announced it that NAIC and Goldman have a partnership. You are our largest partner to date. You, along with several of your colleagues, drove that. We really appreciate it. And it's given me a window. I have a window into a lot of different firms, but my window into Goldman, I want to actually ask you a question that gives you an opportunity to talk about something Goldman has done right. I've been impressed by the number of women leaders that I've been exposed to at Goldman. You mentioned some of the names before, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk about some of your colleagues, female, that are leading businesses that frankly, people may not see in aggregate just how many female senior leaders Goldman has literally developed and promoted. Can you talk a little bit about some of the people?
I would love to. And I mean, I don't know how much time we have because I could go on for a long time. So yes, I'll pick some of my favorites. So,
Yep.
There's Katie Koch, who is, just an absolutely fabulous professional. She is a partner who co-heads our fundamental equity business. And as you know, this is a huge business at Goldman, 100 billion the last time I checked, probably more. And her leadership is not only just incredible in the actual just outcomes and returns they've been delivering for our clients consistently. The one thing that I love about that business is over 50% of the assets are also managed by women. So this isn't just, a strong kick-ass woman running a business. This is a series of women who are making those investment decisions and driving returns. I'll talk about another one, Stephanie Cohen, also an incredible leader. She's the co-head with Tucker York of our entire consumer business, which is, not only just an incredible and important part of the firm, but an exciting area of real innovation for the firm. So this is where we house the Marcus business, which is, Goldman's real exciting push into consumer finance and just doing it in an entirely, different non-brick and mortar consumer driven tech enabled way. And her leadership of that business is incredible. And, I worked with her really closely when she started launch with GS a couple of years ago, actually, 3-4 years ago at this point, to narrow capital gaps for diverse entrepreneurs. Who else? Dina Powell McCormick, who's our, global head of sustainability and inclusive growth across the firm. So really pulling together all, not just, the work that we're doing in asset management, which I'm closest to, but really across the firm. Oh my gosh, I could keep going. Suzanne Garan, who runs launch with GS, who I know you know well, who's leading. Yep. We got to our first 500 million commitment. Now we're on to our second 500 million. I know that you've been spending a lot of time with her with NAIC. Oh my God, Mina Flynn, incredible partner who co-heads our private wealth business, which is one of the biggest growing areas of the firm. Oh my gosh, Kim Posnick, who, obviously investment banking.
So you're making my point. And I want to ask you the question, what is Goldman doing? Because every other bulge bracket that I talk to is struggling, right? They'll admit that they're struggling. They're trying to do experienced hire recruiting. They're trying to poach executives. But a lot of this team started out together. You guys were there from the beginning. What is it about the culture at Goldman? What is it about the investments Goldman is making on the human capital side? Just give me a little bit of the secret sauce. How are you developing so many high performing women?
Yeah. Well, Bob, it's hard for me to compare because I've never worked anywhere else, but except for the Gap and J. Crew and college account or high school. I think there are a few things. I think one, we talked about this earlier in the conversation, this idea of these happy strivers. Yeah. Many of those I just talked about are, certainly didn't grow up with a silver spoon in their mouth, with a dad, grandfather, and great grandfather who ran Goldman, right? These are, women somewhat similar to me who came into this role with maybe a little something to prove. So that's probably a common thread. And I would also say that, part of it is also just the community of women, right? So it's hard I do think firms and institutions, and I won't even for a minute pretend that on diversity more broadly, Goldman's where we want to be. Like,
Sure.
for every amazing senior, woman leader that we have, we should have two, right? So we're all on a journey, but I do think there are enough incredibly successful senior women at Goldman that there's a path. First of all, you can see it, but not only can you see it, that very senior woman is probably your mentor, your friend, like, Lisa Opoku, who's the most senior Black partner at the firm. There's no time I can't call her. There's no problem that's too small for her, too big for her to listen to. Stephanie Cohen, as I mentioned, talked about, she's been a mentor. So I think there's also a closeness amongst senior women at Goldman that it's almost like a safety net. So yeah, that's my take.
So a twisted question a little bit here. The culture had to change a bit to enable and create the leaders that you talked about, but what impact are you all now as leaders having on the culture?
I think I would say some of the strides that we've made, certainly in diversity, definitely obviously is impacted by the diverse leaders that we have. And I think one of the pieces I'm most proud of, it's one thing to have the goals, to be on a journey, to have the path. It's another thing to be very public about it and not only hold ourselves accountable internally, but let the entire market do that for you as well. So even just over the last year or two, there's been massive change. So one, just being, very clear and releasing, our diversity data at a very granular level. That's a new change. Part of that driven by Megan Hogan, another incredible female senior leader who's our chief diversity officer and a dear friend. Things like the targets that we have on hiring. So it's not just like, hey, we need more Black professionals, more, Latinx professionals. This is our specific target for our incoming class of analysts, for our incoming class of associates. And importantly, which is a bit inside baseball, but now our vice president population, which is the most significant, population at the firm, now there's specific targets there, which not only is going to impact how we hire off campus, but also just how we do our lateral hiring, which, of course, is really important as well. So I think that level of transparency, that level of targets, accountability, this, basic idea you can't manage what you don't measure, I think that change has been, of course, it all comes from the top in terms of, David Solomon and his goals. But I think that cohort of senior diverse leaders has also really pushed the needle there.
I'm happy to hear you talk about using business to change the business. That's how I've come to phrase it. But so many organizations, so many institutions are afraid to put objectives on hiring, right? Because of the whole notion of set-asides and quotas and this language that basically creates a third rail. You can't do it. But I would argue, and it sounds like you're backing me up, you actually can't make the change if you don't measure and hold people accountable. Would you say people at Goldman are accountable for diversity, equity, and inclusion? Because it sounds like that's exactly what you're saying.
Absolutely. You at this point, and I can't get into our secret sauce, you cannot hire in a way that is not aligned with our goals and that be okay. And that's the responsibility of, starting at the very top, from our C-suite to our management committee to the division heads of all the important, key businesses at the firm, down to pretty much every hiring manager. So it is, it's not only that accountability and those metrics, but that it's pushed, to every single level. It's not a unique or uncomfortable conversation for folks to say, hey, where were the diverse candidates for this role? Oh, we didn't find any. How are we going deeper? Like, this isn't just, hey, call this university. Like, we want to talk to like the program level degrees, right? So it is just more of the culture now. So it's like that accountability and those metrics. Some of that is, it's important to hold ourselves accountable, but I think in some ways it's also, it's like the writing on the wall that just reinforces it and makes it part of our everyday just operating procedures. Again, I've been at the firm almost a couple decades now. I see the difference, and it's meaningful.
So Margaret, let's turn and really more into a counseling type way for the people of color, the women, and others that are somewhere in the world that see Goldman Sachs, may not have a point of entry or access. What should they be doing to prepare themselves to make themselves competitive in the world that Goldman is trying to create, the firm that Goldman is trying to create? How do they make themselves competitive and prepare themselves for it?
So I would say, we'll take it back to the happy striver. I'm a hustler. I think that you can't, I've always, and I probably shouldn't share this publicly, but oh well, I've always taken the word no as like a suggestion, not an answer. And even the Urban Investment Group, and this is a funny story. I emailed the head of the business at the time, I think either my first or second week in securities. I was like, there's this business, it's amazing. Like I've got to meet the man who has this business. Maybe he'll give me a job or mentor me. And he didn't respond, but I didn't give up. I stalked them for a while, and then another woman took over the business, and I remember her saying, well, I guess we're gonna have to hire you because you're really not gonna leave us alone. Right. And so I think persistence is really important. I think that you can't give up. And I almost hate saying this because I feel like it goes without saying, and sometimes, especially with a diverse audience, it can certainly come off the wrong way. But you just got to be on your game. Yeah. Researched, ready, clued in, especially in this world, even from when I started 20 years ago. I feel like there's so much more information out there, so much you can learn on your own. So I think just sticking at it, being persistent, reaching out, networking, but also importantly, having some sense of what you really want to do, right? Finance, as means a million things. It's almost everything and nothing. And I think the key to success, at least for me, has been working on projects, transactions, businesses, et cetera, that mean something to me. Like I am terrible at things I don't care about. It's just like I'm terrible. And so I also think there's something really important about finding work that is meaningful to you, because it's a slog, right? I work hard. We all work hard. There's no one both in Goldman that I work with, but also our clients, both private sector, public sector, who aren't putting in the time and the work. And I think the only way that that's possible, especially over a long period of time, like anyone can grind for a few months or a couple of years, but to really put the time in and stick to it, I think you have to like it. And so I also think that's another thing that's really important about breaking in. Do all that networking and research, but also try to figure out what you like and what you care about.
Well, Margaret, you've been very generous with your time. I want to thank you for joining me on NAIC Insights. This was a fascinating conversation. I appreciate your candor. I appreciate you being that happy striver, and I look forward to continuing to work with you through our partnership with NAIC and Goldman.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care. Well, that concludes another episode of NAIC Insights, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode coming up soon. Have a great day.